This question says the point P is on the unit circle. If the y coordinate of P is -3/5 and P is in quadrant 3, then what is the x coordinate? So imagine that we have some unit circle here. We're told that some point P is in quadrant 3. Well, quadrant 3 is right here, this bottom left quadrant. So we know that some point P, let's just label it right here. So this is point P. One thing that we know about the unit circle is that the radius of the circle is 1. So in other words, if we draw a line from the origin to this point P, this distance must be 1 right here. Now, one other thing that we can note is that if we draw a straight line from P to the x-axis, we can form a right angle. So notice we have a right triangle right here. So we're told that the y-coordinate of P is -3/5. In other words, this side of the triangle, this dimension, is -3/5. And all we want to find is what is the x-coordinate. So the x-coordinate of this point P, that would be this distance right here on the triangle. So let's label that x. Now when we have a right triangle like this, we can use the Pythagorean theorem to find a missing side length if we know the other two sides. So the Pythagorean theorem says a squared plus b squared must be equal to c squared, where c is the hypotenuse, or the longest side. So in this triangle, 1 represents the hypotenuse. It's the longest side of the triangle. So what we can say is -3/5 squared plus x squared must be equal to 1 squared. So all we have to do now is just solve this equation for x. So to do that, we can distribute this exponent right here into both the numerator and denominator of this fraction. So we can say -3 squared divided by 5 squared plus x squared must be equal to 1 squared is just 1. So let's simplify a little bit. -3 squared, that's 9, over 5 squared is 25, plus x squared must be equal to 1. Now, one trick we can use is we can write 1 as a fraction with the same denominator as 25. So that would be 25 over 25. So to solve for x squared, we can subtract a 9/25 from both sides. So we get x squared is equal to 25 over 25 minus 9 over 25 is 16 over 25. And the last step is to solve for x, we can take the square root of both sides. So on the left-hand side, we get x is equal to, when you take the square root of a fraction, you can take the square root of the numerator and the denominator individually. So in other words, the square root of 16, that's 4, over the square root of 25 is 5. Now, one last thing to note is that point P, we said, is in quadrant 3. And in quadrant 3, the x values and the y values are both negative. So this would be a -4/5. So that would be our final answer on this one. Or if we wanted to write P as a coordinate, we would say that P has the coordinates -4/5, comma, -3/5. So that's our answer for this one.